How's it going, everybody? Another Coach Convo here with a great panel of guests that are going to be willing to share a lot of their wealth and knowledge through their coaching careers and their stops along the way. So I'll just get it going. I'm TK Kiernan from Sacred Heart University. We compete in the Northeast Conference, and we're located in Fairfield, Connecticut.
Rob Ditoma, Fairleigh Dickinson University, also in the Northeast Conference. The school's in Teaneck, New Jersey.
Jayson King, University of Dayton. We're in the Atlantic 10 and located in Dayton, Ohio.
Jeff Mercer, Indiana University.
I'm Rob Smith at Ohio University. We're located down in Athens, and we're a member of the Mid-American Conference.
I'm Ryan Wheeler from St. Joseph's University, and we're also in the Atlantic 10, located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Awesome. So again, I just want to thank you guys for coming on, and we'll get right into a couple questions that I think will be thought-provoking, and maybe you guys will be able to give a little different spin on how you're running your programs or how you've gone through transitional phases in your careers to new programs. What I'll start with is maybe you give a couple seconds on day one, year one. What was that like? What was the first thing you did in your new position? And then, kind of segueing it into the most challenging coaching philosophy that you have to implement to a new group of guys who might not have the track record with you through the recruiting process or previous years, and just kind of how you started to mold that group into the group that you wanted it to become. So I'll send it to Rob first. This year was first year for you at FDU. So take it away.
Sure. For me, the reason jobs open, you're usually not taking over a program that's going so well more often than not. Now, some people are, but we weren't. So I knew, and I kind of tried to spend the whole summer getting to know the guys as best you can. Getting hired in July, and then you're not going to see these guys till August or September. So I was trying to get to know them via phone. If I knew what Zoom was back then, it might have been easier, but I had no idea what Zoom was. So it was a difficult process, but I was trying not to get skewed by anybody within this department or anybody that played against FDU. I didn't want anyone's opinion. I wanted to get to know the guys myself. And so for me, like, if you're looking for like a mantra, I went in with the attitude, the first day I meet these guys in person, I am telling them this is a total clean slate for all of us. I do not care what anyone has said about you. I don't care what your numbers were, good or bad. I think so for some people that was great, I guess, to hear, because maybe they were coming off a poor year on the field, or they had gotten in trouble off the field or whatever. It was a total clean slate for all of us. So I thought that was the fairest way to approach it. So you were going to show me who you were, and I wasn't going to have anybody else. And we were, same thing as coaches, we were going to show you who we were. I didn't want my reputation or our assistants' reputation to be something they were just going off. I wanted them to know who we were as people, and we had to show it every day. So it kept everybody kind of in that clean slate mentality. And I think that was first and foremost music to some people's ears. And a returning player who had great success is probably like, what do I got to prove? I started every game. I did everything for this program, but I thought it was the fairest approach. And some of these guys everyone's taken over in a different situation, but I think wherever your situation is, I think that's a good model to take after.
Yeah, I've done the whole takeover program that hasn't done so well in the past, or the relative past, 3 times at UMass Boston, Franklin Pierce University, and then obviously at Dayton. I think Division I, I think the challenges are just that pop up when you take over a program are just different. And, some of the things that you come across as it relates to roster management, scholarships, things like that, it's just when you take over a program and the roster is not quite the way that you want it to look, it's very difficult to navigate that's respectful, and then also conducive to figuring out how as soon as you can get it all right. So I think for me, I think that was the most difficult part of it all, is just managing that and kind of making the adjustments necessary as far as that's concerned, with kind of an eye on what you're doing in the immediate future, but also in the in the many years to come. So I think for me, just handling that and the business side of it, also trying to win games your first year was and is difficult. I think for anyone that takes over a program that you're kind of that there needs to be some adjustment with the roster. But I think just instilling the things that that work based on your past, and I think you just make those things really important, and you just hope that the players buy into what you're talking about. And I think the first years sometimes it can be like Rob was alluding to, is a clean slate makes guys feel good and things like that. But at the end of the day, there's games to be played, and eventually the clean slate turns into a slate that's written right in front of you. And I think making adjustments based on what you see over the course of a full year. There's, the good thing about what we do is we're around these guys a lot, and you find out a lot when the games are going on. In the fall, sometimes you can get fooled in a positive or negative way about where your program's at, the personnel you have. But I think just instilling the things that are important and getting that buy-in that we all talk about, I think is what gets you kind of moving things forward.
I'm having transitioned to Indiana 2 years ago. The first thing that stood out to me was what I prefer maybe as a style of play. I think we all have our own preferences and desires. Isn't necessarily what the roster currently built is. As Coach King was talking about, what is currently the style in which it wants to play. And so I think the hard part as a coach walking into it is to say, what I desire the style of play is not what we're going to play right now, because that's not how this team is built. So I think it's all of our obligation to provide the players that we have currently with the best possible experience, and then at the same time being able to transform ourselves into the style of coach that this team needs for us to be successful. And while we may have an eye on the future, we also have an obligation to the present and to the experience that the players have and an opportunity to win. And that may mean that we may have to play a different style than we need to. I may have to learn a different style and then be outstanding at teaching that. I think the most difficult part as you're teaching your particular idea of a program, at least for me, the difficult part is to create an environment that values the lifestyle, the diet, the nutrition, the weight room. Those things are very, very difficult and very demanding. And it's not just when I show up to practice and it's 3 hours of practice, and it's the decisions that I make on a Thursday night at midnight. That's a real difficult thing, a difficult concept. Certainly when you're 18, 19 years old and you're exposed to college for the first time. And so I would say the ability to coach to a style that maybe is not your forte, but it's a requirement of your team. And then secondarily, the ability for me to create an environment that values the lifestyle and the physicality, and how quickly can we get to that level, and how much can we grow in a short period of time. I would say are the two pieces for me.
Yeah, I'd build on that. I know one of the things from my experience, I think as you take over a program, is navigating apathy. If you're walking into a scenario that has not had success for an extended period of time, I think people in general grow to sort of accept that a little bit, right? And then it just kind of becomes the norm. And I remember the first team meeting that I had. I just come from Creighton University as an assistant, where we'd gone to back-to-back regionals. We just literally, I was a couple weeks out of coming back from the UCLA regional, where we got to the final. And one of my first speech to our team was about a dog pile and going to a regional. And I'll never forget the silence in the room and just like the crickets, because it was not really believable at that particular point in time. It had been almost 20 years since the school had really done something like that. And so I quickly realized that there was going to be a large process of changing mindsets, of changing the way that we did certain things and not even just about the what, but the why we're doing it, and really connecting those dots as to those daily decisions that Merce just touched on, and getting guys to understand the value of certain things and how it ultimately connected to an end goal. And it took a while. I mean, I'll never forget that really the first time that I really believed that it connected was that speech I gave to our team was in the fall of 2012. And it never really hit me that it connected until the spring of 2015. And we had just finished sweeping Akron. And I believe we were maybe a game back of first place, about a little over halfway through the season, and kind of brought the guys up after the game, had a few words, and we were kind of going to break it down and leave. And one of our fifth-year senior shortstop, he just out of nowhere on his own said, "Hey, listen, I know we've talked about just trying to make the conference tournament. We're beyond that now. We're going to try to win the league." And once I saw the ownership of that goal, I quickly flashed back to that speech where there was crickets and the apathy and really the disbelief and the, hey, yeah, that's a cool message, but that's not really what we're doing. That I saw these guys really take shape of that, and it became theirs now. It wasn't just my speech. It was their own belief. And I think that, for me, as I look back, that was one of the biggest challenges in taking over a program that had not been to a regional in almost 2 decades, was just to get them to really believe that it was achievable and that it was something that could realistically be accomplished. And then that year we ultimately did. And so that laid a lot of groundwork and foundation. But I think that to me was one of the biggest challenges, is just really getting that belief system in place so that it just wasn't a bunch of words, but it actually led to actions, which led to decisions, which then in turn, got us an outcome and a result.
Sorry. Yeah, look, a lot of great things have been said here, and just to, I know Rob's aware, Jayson, you're maybe aware, but Rob Smith and Jeff Mercer, my head coaching experience, came from being the head coach at Temple University, which, the program was eliminated. So my experience is a little bit different, and we don't need to go off on a tangent about, talking about programs being eliminated, but, a lot of the things that you guys talked about are so very true. I think, the big thing for me was, how do we build trust with this new group of players in this program that you're coming into, but yet we're going to make changes as well, because they know the changes are going to come and things are going to be different, but yet you're trying to build that trust and get that buy-in from them. And, navigating that is very difficult. Rob, you brought up a great point in that, you want to go in and have a clean slate for those guys to be able to show themselves. And Jayson, you talked about, it really does take a full year for you to see kind of what their true colors are, and to put them through all the paces of, the fall and practicing in the fall, but then the games and what you see from them in the games can be completely different. So you really need that full year in order to evaluate and see where they're at, what they can bring to the table, because there are going to be changes to the roster, and the style of play is going to be different, or could be different. So, there's a lot of information that you're taking in on a daily basis, and trying to guide the program in the direction that you want it to go. But at the same time, you don't want to lose trust. And if you make too many changes and you do too many things that are different, well, then it's very fragile. You can lose them really quick. So I think trying to build that trust while making changes was the hardest thing, for me to try to navigate that first year.
No, and that's great stuff. I think kind of pivoting the conversation a little bit to more of a internal assessment of yourselves and your coaching career and where you're at during this time in which, you're going to a new program or taking over a new program. The question is, what lesson learned in your new leadership role was the toughest to adjust to and take on and take ownership of? So if I start with Rob at Ohio, Rob, you were a pitching coach prior to becoming a head coach, correct? Okay. Yeah. So the rest of us were more or less hitting coaches and positional coaches. I want to get your perspective on prior to taking over at Ohio, you were in charge of your staff, and now you get elevated to this role where you're now in charge of a whole program, and it's your staff, it's the hitters, it's the budgeting, it's everything. I guess what was something that you noticed to be the biggest change, or the one that, you know, maybe you weren't expecting, that kind of hit you out of nowhere, that you had to adapt to sort of on the fly, that you can't prepare for in that new role?
Well, I think one of the things, you know, is as a head coach, you know, if you've never done it before, when you first get into that seat, it's hard. You don't realize how much what you say matters, and how much how you say it matters. As an assistant, I don't think you fully realize that, because I think when you're dealing with assistant coaches as a player, you certainly take what they say a certain way, but you're not the one that makes the lineup. You're not necessarily the one that affects their scholarship or their playing opportunity. And that was one of the things that I realized very quickly. I often give the example of, you know, when I was a pitching coach, I could be down in a bullpen setting talking to a pitcher and kind of giving him the pep talk, telling him, hey man, like, keep working at it. I'm fighting for you. I'm talking to the head guy. I'm trying to get you out there. Just give me something to work with here. I'll try to get you some innings. Just keep working. And he's like, yeah, man, you got my back. That's great. And that's a great way to connect. Well, as the head coach, you start to say that and give that speech, and they just kind of look at you like, well, you're the one that makes the lineup, man. Put me out there. And now you're going, well, okay, you know. And so you start to realize that some of these cues and some of the tactics that you would use to build trust, they quickly could call you on it and go, well, you have that power to make that decision. So if you genuinely and truly want me on the mound, put me on the mound. Or you want me in the lineup, put me in the lineup. And I quickly learned that I think the words that I used, the timing, the tone, the context, I quickly learned that it was something that had to be very, very aware of. Whereas an assistant, you could shoot from the hip a little bit more because it just didn't resonate quite as far. And now as a head coach, those words matter a lot. Those talks matter a lot. And I think I learned that you just got to be very, very diligent in how you do those, and just understand how that player is going to take it and what the ramifications of those words are.
I would 110% agree with that. I think that the impact of your words and your actions, you don't realize just how much impact they have with the team. And you're right. You've got to be careful in what you say, how you say it, how you walk, you know, onto the field for a practice that day. You know, you may have some issues or some things that happened earlier in the day, you know, that impact or affect your mood at that particular time. And you know, if you walk out there and you know, you're not in the right frame of mind and ready to go, they pick up on that right away. And, you know, then practice can go off the rails real quick. So I would agree 110% with what you just said there, Rob. I would also say the other struggle is, you know, as assistants, we know our responsibilities, what we've got to handle and take care of. And really, there's not many other people for us to delegate it to. As a head coach, you've got to delegate. You don't have time to handle everything and to do everything as you may have done as an assistant. You've got to delegate. So that trust that you have with your players, you know, you've got to have that trust with your staff and let them go with things. And you know, they're gonna make mistakes, and they maybe will do things differently than how you would do them. But you've got to have trust that it's going to get done, and you've got to be able to push some things off. Otherwise, you'll run yourself crazy trying to handle all the things that a head coach needs to be responsible for.
I think it's really important as the transition to a head coach that you create the environment that you're successful in. And so, you know, when I was an assistant and I was a hitting coach and I was the outfield coach, when I was a recruiting guy, it would be very easy for me to go be the head coach and then delegate all of those responsibilities of things that I did really well. And for me to take on more of an administrative role, that's not my strength. That's not what I do well. And so I try to create an environment where I can continue to do the things that I've always done really well, and then delegate the things that I don't, and allow those people the latitude to just do their jobs. Create structure and to help them to understand what their job is. But at the end of the day, they're an adult and it's their job. And I give them guidance and I check in, but that's their responsibility. I think oftentimes we become a head coach and we stop doing the things that allowed us to have success. If I stop coaching the hitters, then I'm not doing the one thing that I'm really good at. So now I take on a responsibility that I'm not necessarily great at, and I leave the one thing that I do really well. I need to be able to do those things and to be able to have people do their job. I think the other hard part when you first walk into that role is understanding that somebody always needs you at all times. And that for me was very draining and it was very stressful. I spent the majority of my time on the road recruiting or on the phone. I was kind of my own separate entity and doing my job to the best of my abilities, and not everybody needed me all the time. So as a transition in my phone, you got hundreds of text messages and thousands of emails and dozens of phone calls, and somebody always needs you, and it's always an emergency. It's always an emergency. I need you right now. I need you in this 1 second. And that was really hard for me at first. And I eventually got to the point where I conceded to myself that I couldn't handle all of them all the time immediately, and I would do the best that I could do, and that's all that I could do. I needed to be a dad, and I needed to be a husband, and I needed to take care of my family and the players, and I'll get to everything else when I can get to it, how I can get to it, and I hope that everyone understands, not to be disrespectful, but there's only one of me, and there's 24 hours in a day. And if I give all of myself away all the time, then there's none left for the people that I really need to be able to give myself to. That was a really hard transition for me. But once I freed myself of that responsibility, it really helped me to enjoy my job better in my life, and it allowed my family to like who I was. They liked being around me a lot more when I wasn't so stressed out all the time.
Kinger, what you got?
Well, probably a little bit different than some of the guys on the call. It's just I've been a head coach for 23 years and was an associate head coach for just one. But for me, I started as a head coach when I was 25, so there was obviously a lot of challenges in that. You think you know everything when you're that young, and you really know nothing. And then you make mistakes along the way, and you get better, and you learn how to coach better and be more effective, and let the players run and give them the reins a little bit more as you go. So it's as I think everyone on this call knows, it's a process of figuring out who you are, but most importantly is always being yourself, whether you've been a head coach for a majority of your career or you're transitioning from a long time assistant to a head coach. There's reasons why you're in that new role. And I think being yourself is probably the most important thing when I look at, Rob's a good example. As an assistant, we played against those guys, and now he's a head coach. And as long as he's how he was as an assistant and doesn't change, but makes adjustments continuously, he's going to have a lot of success. But I think being yourself it all starts with that. But and then I think about good head coaches, and it's just consistency. That's the first thing that I think about is guys that show up every day and the players know what they're going to get on a daily basis. And trust, is obviously really important. But I think the expectations and the consistency from the head coach, and then just being unwavering, I think, that's the stuff that allows you to, whether it's incremental or it's a big jump, whatever it is, in advancing your program, that's what's going to allow that to happen, because the players are going to know what to expect. And then that in turn is going to breed the trust that I think we've all mentioned. But I know as an assistant, it's being a head coach for a long time and then becoming an assistant, that's very challenging too. I think both sides create challenges that you're not quite ready for, but you just have to be ready to adjust to.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the biggest thing for me, and mostly everyone touched on it, was like I'm a very regimented person, try and map out the day, schedule it, and stick to it. And that was very easy as an assistant. Like one thing might pop up you weren't ready for. You get in the office and I'm going to plan out what I'm doing with the infielders today, what I'm doing with the base runners, what does coach want to do with the hitters, blah, blah, blah. And you can stay on schedule. And I think Jeff mentioned it. Every problem becomes your problem. Like you got 35 players, you have 3 assistant coaches, you have the strength coach, the academic advisors, the alumni that somebody wants to talk to you, and it always falls on your desk. So, you try to prepare for that, but if I could tell you the amount of days where I mapped out the day and it stayed according to the plan as a head coach, it was very minimal the days that would happen. So something always seemed to pop up, but I think the biggest transition for me was the players have a different relationship. I think Wheels touched on it. They're a lot different relationship with the players when you're an assistant than you are with the head coach. And Rob touched on it too. It's like you make the lineup. They're not rushing to your office to talk to you, where maybe at Fordham, 5 guys would come in through the course of the day and talk about a pitcher we're about to face. And when you're the head coach, they're kind of avoiding you at times. I think until you maybe establish the culture that you need and the environment, because in year 1, everyone's still getting used to each other. But the biggest thing I've tried to avoid, like Jeff said, there are certain things that I coached that I was responsible for that we had success, and I know that helped me get a job here. And I wanted to make sure I didn't ever become the coach that stopped coaching because he's the head coach. Everybody warned me, yeah, your coaching days are over. You're a head coach now. And I know they're joking. It's tongue in cheek, but I refuse to not coach the team. The hard part for me is picking and choosing what to delegate and what to stay on top of. And at the same time, having assistants know that they have power in certain aspects of the game. So that's the biggest adjustment for me, is delegating to the staff, but at the same time knowing I got to coach the players, and I can't not coach the game. And I think that's crucial when you become the head coach.
No, that's really good stuff. My next question will go to Jeff first, and you guys are all under this category. You're all great recruiters. That's why you're in the positions that you're in. You've kind of laid down the foundation, and you know what your kind of guy is. Okay. But what happens when you're either in a program previously as an assistant, or now you're the head coach and you're starting to see success with the guys that you're bringing in? Does that change, how you're going to recruit in upcoming years, or do you stay the course and kind of go after the same guy? Obviously there's new heights that every program wants to reach, but what's the thought process behind a year-to-year plan as far as how to attack recruiting? And it's kind of like a 2-part thing. Once you become a head coach, you kind of lose that responsibility, or you lose the time to be on the road as much as you are maybe when you're a recruiting coordinator. So what do you tell your assistant who's going to go out and find the kind of guy that you want? Obviously you're going to have the final say, but does the plan change, and how are you getting that message across to assistants that you want this kind of guy?
The plan doesn't change to me. Now, what we have currently, and I was really fortunate because we took over. We inherited a good team at Wright State when Coach Lovelady went to Central Florida, and inherited a good team at Indiana, a talented club. Maybe a different style, but we were fortunate. So you coach to their talents, to their abilities, and then you recruit to yours. And you'll transition over a period of time into the style that you would prefer to play. And so I think that being the first piece. The second piece is, as you're communicating to your staff what the expectation is in recruiting, I think we have to be deliberate, and we have to be precise. We can't leave ambiguity in gray space where it's like, well, you just know what a good player looks like. It's not, I want this. I want him 6'1" and left-handed. I want him to run like this, and I want this ankle mobility. I want him to do exactly like this. He should look like this, talk like this, walk like this, think like this. I want all of those things. And the reality is, the only way to know that is to be involved. And so for me, I'm very fortunate. We have a baseball director of operations, and he does everything in our program. We've started to expand our manager program and bring in student assistants, where a lot of the administrative stuff that I would normally do outside of the big things that I have to do, I delegate those things to our operations and to our managers and to our student assistants. And then I go recruit. I'm on the road. I'm on the phone. I'm talking to recruits every night. That's, to me, it's still what I do best. And the only way to know exactly what's going on in the world of recruiting is to be involved fundamentally at its core with recruiting. Now, I still have to communicate what the expectation is, because I don't have as much time. So when one of our coaches says, "Hey, Mercer, you need to go see this guy," and then I go see this guy and he's not anywhere close to the model or the system that we have in place, now I've just wasted that time that I didn't have. And so they have to be able to say, this is the model, this is the system, this is what you want, we've outlined it, here's a guy, he fits perfectly, go. And now I've not wasted that time, and I've used it accordingly. And that allows us to continue for me to have my hands on everything, but especially the things that I do really well. Now, I will say this, I think it's really important for me as an offensive guy. Our pitching coach, Justin Parker, is our associate head coach, and he's in charge of, like, he has the final say on recruiting pitchers. So we can all find him and we can all say, yeah, I like this guy. But when it's like, just like for position players, for me, I'll have the final say for pitchers. Hey, you're going to go work with this kid every day. I'll make sure I check off. But if you want him, let's go get him. I think we have to respect the position coach that does the opposite of what we do. Me being the hitters, him being the pitchers, or if it was vice versa, if I did the pitchers, he did the hitters.
Kinger, let's hear what you got to say kind of on those two questions.
I think it stays the same. Obviously, you need to adjust, year to year and, based off of your personnel. But for us, I think the head coach involvement is of the utmost importance. I think, like Jeff mentioned, I think there's a reason either you've done a lot of recruiting if you kind of were at programs that didn't have full-time assistants, or you get a head coaching job because of the work you did as an assistant. So to me, to give that up is I see it as not the best for the program. I think and every decision you make as a head coach relates just to that. So I'm very involved with the recruiting, but yet still with the guys that we have in place that are out there on the road, we're meeting all the time about different individual players, about needs, what it should all look like, who we realistically can get, who we can't, and just kind of helping navigate that plan, and then trying to execute it to result in that the personnel that you need. But we're meeting all the time, and then I think for me, just creating a clear path for my guys that are out there seeing players, is that the expectations are known, and if like Jeff mentioned, that I go out to see a player, that it shouldn't be any confusion as far as what we wanted to see in that particular guy, whether it be trying to get a Friday guy or trying to get a shortstop. So I think the more you work with the staff, the easier it is, because they know what my expectations are, and I kind of know how they talk about players, whether or not it's going to be a fit. But for us, if you don't leave a field, a lot of times you want to make your trip worthwhile. But if the next day and the multiple days after that, you're feeling the same way about a player and you're like crazy excited about it, then, we talk about that's probably the right guy. But never trying to force anything, just trying to, see the guys that maybe they're ready right then and there. But for us, sometimes it's a guy that not quite ready, but with some development and, getting around coaches and the right players that they can get there. So, that can be the tricky thing, is forecasting the development, but yet still not being scared to take a chance on a guy that you think has the makeup to get better, and then you have responsibility to develop players. I think it goes back to that, regardless if you're getting, the best of the best recruits or you're getting, the next tier guys. But I think that weighs heavily into the guys we're going to bring in. We want to try to find more about the player than just the ability. Because I think, like I mentioned before, is being around these guys as much as we are, you know exactly who they are over the course of a year, and then eventually, hopefully, 4 years. And when you have guys that want to get better and want to make other players better, I think that's when you start building a program that's going to have continued success, because it'll be passed along from year to year.
Well, yeah, to me, the only way things change is if the situation changes. Like from Fordham, my last place, to here, the budget's a lot different. So you tactically have to change some stuff as far as how many times you're going to be able to travel to locations and see somebody. That would be the only thing. I think everyone's got their philosophy and what they're looking for. It's not that hard. We could all go to a field. Anybody can go to a field and see the best guy. So that's not really the hard part of recruiting. And I think both of these guys that went, Jayson and Jeff, saying it. What I learned a lot this year as a head coach is that if you don't exactly map out and explain what you're looking for, whether that's to a player or even to your assistants, then it's not their fault if they're not bringing back getting the effort back you want, or bringing back the exact recruits type that you want. You need to really explain and have a plan as to what you're looking for in a player, what you're looking for out of that practice, what you're looking for out of this recruiting trip. And that's just something I'm trying to get better at, is really don't get mad at this or that if you haven't explained in a way that person understands that this is the plan and this is who we're going after, and now we got to go find it. So that's my takeaway from it, is we don't want to go blindly look for talent, and we don't want to just go blindly add to the roster. We need especially probably all our schools, but you can't make too many mistakes and get away with it. Like, you need to be specific in what we're trying to build. And eventually I think you'll get to, like Jeff's saying, you'll coach the team that plays the style you want it to play, but you got to go out and not just randomly find pieces of talent. Because I think we all know it's not there's a certain level of talent that you got to find. But once you get to that talent, there's something else that wins. It's not talent, it's the other stuff. So, and that's the hardest thing to equate and measure, but that's kind of my take on it, is you just, as the head coach, really need to map out and have those convos. So it's not like, when I'm sure all of our assistant days, or when you're an assistant, it's not so much you trying to sell the head coach on, we got to offer this to this guy. It's more, we're all on the same page now because he fits into exactly what the head coach explained, what we're trying to look for.
Rob, do you have anything to add to that question? Then I kind of have a separate question for Wheels.
Yeah. I would build on, a lot of what everybody else has said. I think certainly resonates. I'm going to put a little bit of a different spin on that question as it relates to recruiting. And I think it's really one of the challenges and pitfalls that you can run into if you're not careful as you're building a program. Because I know, a lot of times when you're taking over a program, if it hadn't had previous success, first and foremost, you're looking for a type of mindset, right? And that's really what you gravitate towards, are guys that can buy in and believe in the vision that you have for a program. Yes, they've got to have some talent, but you're almost more interested in the brain than you are even the physical tools. And in a lot of cases, and we experience this here, where you do get that collection of players that are hungry and eager to prove something and want to be a part of something like that you can build. But then the pitfall and the challenge that you have to be careful of is, once you do reach a particular goal, which for a program like ours, making a regional is a pretty big deal. And we made a couple of them in a short span. And then the thing you've got to be careful of is, if we just get a little bit better player, maybe we can win that regional, right? But then in doing that, sometimes you can find yourself getting away from the core principles of what got you to that point, right? And so you're willing to take a shot and take a gamble on a really talented kid that you think could be that arm that could beat that SEC team you've got to beat in a regional, right? But then all of a sudden, he's not necessarily the brain that you want, that mixes with your culture and your team. And you do that a few times, and all of a sudden you look up and maybe you've missed. right? And now you've got some holes. And when you reflect on that, I think the challenge is and I think Mercer said it best, is you got to stay kind of true to who you are and what you are as a recruiter. And I think you've got to be careful that if you have a formula that really works, and it does work, and you get to a certain place, that you don't go so far outside of it thinking that one next really talented player is the answer to the next step. It may be the same process, right? It's just maybe you play a little bit better game in that region and you win it. It's not that you have to take a bunch of other gambles and get outside of a philosophy, which, you know, for me, I think especially at really any program, but I think at a mid-major program, that brain, that attitude, how they think, how they act, that plays such an integral part of elevating a program, especially as you're building it, that sometimes I think it supersedes excessive talent. You got to have some talent, but I think how guys go about their business has a big part in turning a program around and building a program.
So Wheels, my question for you is, you know, you're at the helm at Temple, and then you joined St. Joe's. What was the transition like for you going from making the decisions? And I know you and Fritz have a great relationship. I'm not, you know, trying to stir up anything, but, you know, what was different for you and taking, you know, a very significant role on the staff, but also not having necessarily the final say with the recruits that are coming in?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, first of all, coming off of what I went through that last season at Temple, I needed a break from that. Was like playing 3 seasons in one, just dealing with all of the different aspects of losing a program and helping the players move on, trying to save it, so on and so forth. You know, first and foremost, though, you know, when Fritz and I met, I was just grateful that, you know, he was going to give me the opportunity to continue my coaching career. And, you know, I sensed from him, and I told him right away that, you know, look, I'm not going to come in here trying to take your job or do your job. This is your program, and I've been an assistant before, and I know I can move back to that. But, you know, I think on his side, I don't think he feels threatened by me, which, you know, is a compliment to him, that he feels comfortable enough to, you know, counsel me and ask for my advice on a lot of different aspects of the program, knowing, though, that at the end of the day, it's his decision and it's his program. But, you know, it is tough. I'm not going to sit here and say that it was easy to just go back and sit on my hands and not want to make certain decisions. But because of the communication, and I think Fritz, you know, him and I talk all the time, and he's very open about what he's thinking and decisions he wants to make. And, you know, I think it helps that we're alike in our beliefs and stuff on a lot of different things. So, you know, I provided my advice, but then I know at the end of the day, I just got to, you know, it's his decision, it's his program, and I've got to support it to whatever group we're talking to or talking about. But, you know, it's a little bit difficult to sometimes just sit back there and not want to make the decision yourself or act differently, because, you know, you may handle things a little bit differently than the head coach, but it's not your role. You just have to, I'm an assistant, give my advice, give my counsel, do my job to the best of my ability. And that's going to make the program better if I'm doing my job and not trying to be a head coach or act like the head coach here.
No, that's great. You know, I think this was awesome, guys. If you guys have questions for each other, you know, feel free to shout them out. I don't want to hold you hostage here, but you know I learned a lot as a young assistant, and you know, you guys I see you out on the road and see how hard you work, and you guys earned it, and hopefully, you know, that's what this message can help some younger coaches realize is how to go earn it themselves. So, you know, I appreciate the time. If anybody's got anything else, you know, feel free.
I have one question for everyone else, since everyone's saying how the first year was so important, and we kind of got shorted. Obviously, everybody got shorted this year, but it was our first time as with our program here, and we didn't get the full year. So we still have to make some tough decisions. But if anyone has any advice for anyone, but for me personally, year two, I've heard various opinions on what year two is like as a head coach. If anyone has any advice or anything on that, I'd be all ears.
I would throw in, I mean, I can speak to my own experience that, you know, patience sometimes, while very difficult to have, is certainly a virtue in building and taking over a program. I can list a litany of mistakes that I made probably in my first year and a half, you know, in that pursuit of getting it to where we wanted it as quickly as possible. And there was a lack of patience at time on my part that, you know, maybe led to some confrontational situations, some combative situations. And in some ways you look in hindsight and you say, well, some of those scenarios actually made us better, but in others, you know, it maybe actually took a player a lot longer to get to their potential because of the lack of patience that you had with them. And so I know I can speak from my own experience that I look back, and in my first couple of years, I probably would have done a few things differently from that perspective in terms of just what I was expecting back as a result per se, and not losing track of the process. Because, you know, obviously, as it's been said before, we all end up getting head jobs because we were very successful assistants or very successful part of programs we were recruited to. And so when you come out of that, you want that back. You know, you don't, it's hard to go from being a part of regionals and conference championships to then sitting in 10, 11, 12, 13 win seasons. That's a really hard thing to do. And so that patience to navigate that is paramount. And like I said, going back as I reflected on our first couple of years, that would be the one thing that I certainly would probably try to exercise a little bit better.
Just a couple of words that come to mind, and just honesty, and that's with the players that you have, and then with yourself too, is just trying to really get down to what it is that you have on your plate, and then what you're trying to get it all to look like, and then being totally committed to your vision, and then not letting anything take away from that, whether it means that things happen that you can make some of the changes faster, or if you have to wait. But I think the total belief in what your vision is and sticking to the plan that you have in mind, to me, is of the utmost importance.
I would say two things. One is to be honest with yourself on your self-evaluation. We can either be too hard on ourselves, or we can make excuses for ourselves. And just to do an honest evaluation, you know, if I was good or not. Maybe the situation was harder than I anticipated, and I was the best that I could be. But you know, I think we make excuses for ourselves, and I think we don't hold ourselves to a high enough standard, and our blame is often elsewhere when it really should be internalized. And the second thing is, I would caution you to move with too much haste in recruiting. We want to go so quickly, and we want to get it right. We want to get it right now, and especially in the intermediate. If I have short-term pulls to fill, if it seems too good to be true, it normally is, and we end up in a bigger hole than we had anticipated. And so my suggestion would be is to work on young recruits that you have time to build a relationship, and then you can build the short-term last, if that makes sense, because you're gonna impact your program in a positive way. They're going to get better, and so sometimes we don't realize our own impact, and we end up moving so quickly in the short term that we make a small problem into a large problem, and then we don't recruit into the future, and now we don't have the ability to build relationships and get ahead of ourselves. So I know that's what I've done several times, is to try to get into the future and not rush to make decisions in the short term and make the problem worse.
That's hard to top all that advice right there. So I can't add anything else. That was great, and agree with with everything those guys said. With sticking to your vision, having patience, and being honest with yourself. I can't add any more to that. That's good.
I appreciate it. I think that's advice that would help anybody at any stage of any program. So thanks. I appreciate each of you guys answering that.
All right, gentlemen, I appreciate it. Go enjoy the rest of your day, and good luck staying busy for the rest of the spring.
Take care.
Thanks.
All right.
All right,
Take care.
take care.
Thanks. Good luck.
Conclude this.